Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we will discuss how to deploy the ASP.NET Core application with GitHub. We will demonstrate creating a new ASP.NET application and will host the application into the Azure from the GitHub Actions and workflow. Hi, my name is Rakesh Suryavanshi and you're watching PLN. First of all, I'm going to create a new repository for this particular demonstration. So I have my GitHub account wherein I'm going to create a new repository. I'll give it a name as the ASP.NET Core GitHub workflow. This repository will be available to you for the source code in case if you need to download the source code. I'll add README file. Next, we are going to clone this repository on our Visual Studio Code. So first of all, I'll copy this URL or repository URL and clone it on my workstation using the HTTPS URL. I'll open the Visual Studio Code and here I'll clone it. Okay, the repository is cloned successfully. We are going to open this repository here with the clicking on the open button. This is the Microsoft documentation which we can use to create the ASP.NET Core application in Visual Studio Code. So first of all, you need to have a .NET SDK installed on your machine. If you have already installed like me, then you can simply run this command. If not, then first of all, you need to download the ASP.NET Core SDK on your machine and then you can run this command. So this is the command .NET new web app and you'll be able to create a new application on your machine with the help of Visual Studio Code. If you already have an application created, then you can skip this particular section, and in our video we have multiple sections, so you can skip this particular section and move on to the next section, configuring the deployment. So those who do not know how to create application for them I'm going to run this command and let them know that how do we create the application. So here I'll open the terminal at the root of this repository folder and simply I'll run the command .NET new web app and the name of the application. So new is web app is the name of the application which we are going to create, and the .NET Core, which is the version of the .NET Core application which we are going to create successfully. So with this command, you can see that the restore is succeeded, which means that the application at the left hand side has been created. Now you can simply run this command .NET run provided by the URL, and then that will build the ASP.NET application which we have created just now, and it will compile the application on your local machine just to make sure that the application which we are willing to deploy, we are able to build it locally. We do not have any compile time error. That is what we are trying to make sure here. So if I should browse this is what the application looks like. This is our application which we have it here, which is working fine. Now as we have our application ready, and I'll git add this content which we have added just now. So that will add the content to our repository. Simply I don't need the bin and obj files. I'm just removing this content. I'll run the git command, git commit to commit the changes. I'll run the git push command that will push the changes to the GitHub repository, and here if I refresh it, we should have all the content which we have created. In the next step, we will use our Azure portal and create a app service or web app here in the Azure portal. This is the web app which we will use to deploy our application. So first of all, I'm going to create the web app. I'll simply just give it a name as the web app demo 01. Any name you can provide, make sure it is available. I'll just simply add here, and this is the ASP.NET Core application which we are going to use. Central US, I'll provide the location as well, and this is going to create a new application web app with this configuration. Okay, so our application has been created successfully into the resource group. We can click here on the go resource and go to the resource. And if I browse this application just to make sure it is working, As we can see, it's working fine, so there is no issue with the application. So this is our step number 2, which we have completed. So if you have the web app and the ASP.NET Core application already created in your Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, then you can skip this step. And now we'll go to the next step, which is the configuring the GitHub repository for creating the workflow. So for this, first of all, we need the web application published profile. So to get the published profile, I can click here on the get published profile. If you have enough access to download the published profile, we should be able to download it. I've simply opened the content of the published profile. I can just simply copy the content of the published profile. Now I'll go to the repository, and this inside the repository we have the settings section. So click on the settings section. Here on the secret, we are going to create a new secret. So basically in the GitHub, you can create different secrets and environment variable, which will be limited to your repository. So each repository can have their own secret. So this is the secret which we are going to create along with the published profile, which we published profile data, which we have just now copied. I'll click here on the create new repository secret. I'll copy the content of the published profile, and here I will give it a name as the ASP. So you can give any name, whatever you prefer. So this is the name I prefer to give for this demonstration. So this is the which we are going to use in our workflow. Now our secret is ready. So this particular secret is going to be the secret which will be used to publish the application onto the Azure. Now we need to go to the Actions tab and set up a workflow. So next what we are going to do is we will create a workflow. So workflow can be provisioned or configured in GitHub from the Actions tab. So if I click here on the Actions tab, then here you will find so many predefined templates which are available, which you can use to configure your own workflow. So depending upon the project type which we are using, you can browse all these templates and then you can modify the template if you need to. For example, if you see, we have the ASP.NET Core workflow template, and then .NET Desktop, Azure Web App, and there are so many different type of templates available. For example, this is the template which we might be interested in this particular demonstration, so which we can use. So you can simply click here on the configuration, and let's say if you do not have any template which is suitable for your application, you can simply click here on the link and say set up your own workflow. So basically work will give you the ability to trigger an action based on an event. So any event such as the committing code to a repository, publishing a code to a repository, creating a pull request, creating a issue, updating a comment, creating a fork, or there are so many list of actions available, built-in actions available with GitHub. Workflow is the configuration of actions which you set up in your GitHub based on the certain events which might happen on your repository. So that's the definition of the workflow and the actions. Okay. So for this demonstration, like if we have a suitable template available provided by the GitHub, so we are going to use this, and I'll click here on the configuration. So that will give me the list of steps or the actions which it requires to configure my workflow. It has the actions already given. For example, whatever actions which we have done, what we need. Like for example, you need to have the application, then download the published profile, create a secret, and then give it a name as the set up these variables. So whatever we are going to do, some of these steps are mentioned here. So I'll just simply remove that. You can edit all your workflow here in this particular section, and after that you can preview the section in the read-only mode here in the preview tab. Okay, now if you look at the location of this file which we'll be creating, so it will be created inside your repository. There will be a .github folder, and inside the GitHub folder there will be a workflow folder, and all your workflow which we are configuring related to this repository will be added here in this workflow folder. So this is the CI/CD pipeline file or the YAML file which we have. So all these workflows are basically YAML based workflow. So everything is going to be configured in the YAML only. So that's the reason if you look at the file name, file name is the YAML. You can simply commit the changes by clicking here on the start commit. You can create a pull request if you want to, or if you want, you can directly commit to the target branch which you are in right now. For example, I'm in the main branch, so I can simply commit the changes to the main branch for this demonstration. And the simply change has been committed. And as soon as we have committed the change, now if you look at the publish event, on which particular event, which is the on tag specifies that what would be the type of event this particular workflow is based on. So here we have mentioned that on push of any changes onto the branches, which branch, main branch, this workflow is going to be triggered. And as you can see, this orange dot, it means that this workflow is running right now, and we have a workflow running which you can either verify by clicking here on this particular link, or you can go to the actions tab, and here you will find list of all the workflow which are available to you, and you can simply click on the individual workflow to check their status, how many time it has run, and what would be the current status to run. Just to give you an idea about the workflow or the actions dashboard here. So I'm into the current workflow which has been triggered by default as after my check-in, and here is the overall history I can find about my workflow. So this is the workflow which is just now run and it has failed. We'll get into the detail why it has been failed and how do we fix that. We know that a workflow can be triggered on different types of event, though at the moment this particular workflow has been triggered only on the push event. But if you have a workflow which has been possibly triggered on the multiple type of event, you can filter the workflow based on the different type of event from this filter option. You can also filter the workflow based on the status of the workflow. You can also filter based on the branch and the actor who has performed the this trigger basically. Okay, you can go to the individual workflow instance which has been triggered by clicking on this particular link, and then you can get the detail of the workflow, whether it is succeeded, and if you want to review it. If it is failed, then you want to see why it has been failed and things like that. Okay, so it seems like the version it is specified as the 1.2, whereas the application, if you remember, we have created it with the ASP.NET Core version 6. And it is not compatible with that particular version, so we need to update our workflow definition. Okay, so that's one of the way to look at the error. Now coming back to the dashboard again, we do have the option to trigger the workflow manually, which you can click here on this particular button, run workflow, and that will give you the ability to select the branch on which you want to trigger the workflow. And once you select a branch, basically you can run the workflow on the individual branch. So that's some basic information about the workflow. I'll go to the Visual Studio Code and pull these changes which we have configured or pushed here on the repository. So, and later on we'll modify everything from the Visual Studio Code. So I'll run the git pull command just to make sure that we are able to pull the changes. As we have the changes like the GitHub workflow folder, and then this is the workflow folder which we have it here. Okay, so just to give you an idea about the template, this is the name of the workflow which will be displayed on the actions tab. So you can change the names, and this is the display name which will be available here. These are the global environment variable, the environment variable which will be globally available to all the different sections of your workflow. So that's the environment variable which you can define it here. So by default, these are 3 environment variable given. You can define any number of environment variable right here. You can also define the environment variable on the individual jobs as well. Next, we have the on tag, which specifies the event on which this particular workflow is based upon. For example, on push of the branch, on any changes which will be pushed on this main branch, this particular workflow is based on basically. This is the workflow dispatch tag, which says that if you have this particular tag mentioned on your workflow, it means that you have the ability to run the workflow manually. If you remove this particular tag, you won't be able to run the workflow manually. So if you simply commit these changes by putting the hash tag, then you won't be able to run it manually. Next, you have the jobs. So within the workflow, you need to have at least one job. To define a job, you simply define the jobs collection with the jobs tag, and within the jobs tag you define the different number of jobs. So let's say in this case we have a job called build. So build is a job which will be responsible for compiling the ASP.NET Core application, and then it will capture all the compiled output, which is our artifact, which will be treated as an artifact, and this will publish the artifact into a Git repository, and that's the job of the build activity. So that's the whole responsibility of my build job. Okay, hypothetically this is the activity, and next I could have another job which is, let's say, deploy job, and which will be responsible for downloading the artifact which has been published on the previous stage, and then it will simply deploy the application to the target environment. Now if we go into the detail of the individual job, each job could have multiple different steps. So the steps can be defined here as the steps section. So you need to define the steps section, and then within the steps you can define the individual steps. So you could have one or more steps. You can have hundreds of steps within the job. Now here with the build job, you have specified this build job is going to be run on the which operating system. So GitHub provides the ability to run your jobs on the different type of operating system. For example, you can run the job on the Ubuntu operating system, which is based on Linux. You can run it on the Windows based operating system, or you can run it on the Mac OS. So you need to specify which particular operating system this particular job is going to run. So that is something which you can specify here. If you have an application which is supposed to be built on the multiple operating system, then you can define your own metrics, which will have a demonstration. I already have a demonstration on my previous video. How do you define the metrics with the job? Which the link is given in the description. You can view that particular configuration out there. So that's about the runs on tag. So make sure you have the runs on tag depending upon the operating system on which you want to perform the build. Because we have the ASP.NET Core application, so that will be suitable to run on the Ubuntu latest. In the steps, as I said, you could have multiple steps. So these steps could be defined with two different types. One way to define the step is to define with the users keyword. Users keyword, it means that you are willing to use a built-in actions which has been provided at the GitHub repository. So in GitHub Actions, we have a marketplace. So within the marketplace, there are thousands of different action types which are being created by different organizations. So those actions types, if you build an action type, if you want to use it in your repository, in your workflow, then you can use those action types with the help of users keyword. So simply, if you want to use a built-in actions in your GitHub workflow, you can use that particular GitHub actions with the help of keyword users. Now, if you want to run a simple bash command or PowerShell command or any other command in your GitHub action as a step, then you can simply use the keyword run. So run is the keyword which will be used to run any command in line. So this is the only two different type of steps available. So which you need to remember. Simply, if you want to run actions, built-in action, use the users keyword. If you want to run a simple command, you can use it with the run tag. Okay, that's it. So the example of the users keyword, first example, I would like to download the or check out my branch on which this particular source on which this particular workflow is running. So it will, this very first step will check out the source code. Next step will set up the .NET Core based on the actions tab, which is the GitHub action for setting up the .NET. Obviously, this action type requires the certain number of parameter to be passed. So to pass the parameter, for example, to set up the .NET, what would be the .NET version you want to set up your workflow? So you need to specify the .NET version. So .NET version is which we are specifying it with the help of environment keyword. So environment variable. So this is the environment variable which we have defined here. So that's what we are going to use it here. To use any environment variable or any secret, you can in GitHub, you can simply use the $, double curly bracket open, and then environment dot the name of the environment variable or secret dot name of the secret. So that's what we are specifying the .NET version. So that will set up the .NET version based on the version 5, and that's where it is failing. So what we are going to do now, we are going to specify the version 6 because we know that our application is based upon the version 6. Hopefully it will fix the issue. Next, we have another built-in actions template which we are using to cache the NuGet packages and which we might be using in our application. So that this particular cache action will basically cache this step for the subsequent workflow actions, so that it won't take much of a time. Followed by this, we have certain number of command which we would like to run. So the same command which I have run it on my local machine, I would like to run it on my GitHub action. So for example, command is the run build, which is the .NET build command, and then we would like to publish the command, publish the artifact. So I'll run the .NET publish, so that will publish the artifact, and then simply I would like to upload the artifact to the GitHub repository or to GitHub actions, okay, to my GitHub workflow. So I am going to use the action type as in the upload artifact. So there is our artifact available. Next job is the deploy job. Again, we would like to run the deploy into the event to latest, and here we are using the needs keyword. Needs keyword is simply we use to set up a dependency between the different jobs. So for example, we have a job here as a build job, so and then deploy job, and we know that deploy we want to run only if build is going to be succeeded, right? So that's how we set up a dependency with the needs keyword. So in .NET or in Azure DevOps, you set up a dependency with the depends on tag or depends on keyword. Here you set up a dependency with the needs keyword, and you specify build, which is the name of your previous job. Here we are setting up the environment variable. These are the environment or the deployment gate kind of thing which we have in Azure DevOps. So you can set up the environment, and here you can simply configure your gated check-in or the reviewer, so that when it is going to deploy, your reviewer would have chance to take an action whether you are ready to deploy onto the target environment or not. Okay. Again, you have the steps section where we are defining the different steps. The very first step, we would like to download the artifact. Which artifact? The artifact which we have published on the build stage. So similar artifact, we are downloading it here. Make sure the name of the artifact which we have given, it is the same as the name which we have given at the time of upload. Now, as we have downloaded the artifact, we are simply ready to publish the artifact here. So to publish the artifact, simply I am going to use the built-in actions available with my GitHub actions, which is the action type web app deploy, and that requires 3 parameters: the name of the web app which we are going to deploy, the publish profile which we have just created in our secret, and then the package path. So these are the 3 parameters which you need to pass. So let's go to the web app name. This is the variable which we have. So we need to give the correct web app name so that we can deploy to the correct instance of the web app. I'll copy the web app name. Now the secret name, as you can see, we are using the secret, then the name of the secret. So we need to use the secret name as well. So here I have used the secret as the publish profile. Okay. So this is the name of my secret, which I would like to use to deploy. And this web app go package path, we are going to keep it as is. Now let's say if you have the ASP.NET Core application which is created into a different folder, or you have a folder of hierarchy in your source code repository in which you have the application, and you want to target that specific location or directory location, then you can specify the directory location using the attribute. Let's say we have a .NET build. So at the moment the application is on the root directory. So possibly this .NET build command will work as is. But let's say if you have the source code into different location, then you can simply use this working directory, and then you can specify where exactly is your working directory. Okay, so for now, this demonstration, I do not need to specify the working directory because everything is there in the root directory, but in your case, you might want to specify the working directory. Okay, it seems like we are ready to deploy the changes. So let's commit the changes what we have. And as soon as I'm going to commit the changes, this will trigger the action and we should have our action in progress. As you can see, after the commit, we have the action in place right now, which I can get into the detail by clicking on the action instance. It's browsing and we have two stages. One is build and one is deploy. So it seems like the supported version format is incorrect, which we have provided. So I need to provide the correct version. So the version we need to specify is the 3-digit version. So let's verify it again. So if I verify again this time, its setup is completed. It has set up the dependency. Build job is also completed. Publishing artifact is also completed. So our build activity is completed now. It will go to the deploy step, and if I go to the settings again while the deployment is running, and now if I go to the environments, I should have a deployment environment or development environment. This is the environment tag which we have used in our deployment stage. Here in the environments, I can set the required review. So basically, required review setup is wherein you want to set up the reviewer based deployment. So if you want to set up a deployment based on some reviewer will perform an action as reviewer approve or reject, and then only if you want to deploy, that is what you can set up here. You can provide the name of the GitHub user who is responsible for reviewing the code. It seems like our build and deploy stage is succeeded, and I can simply go ahead and browse the application, and there you go. So our application is simply deployed successfully. Build and deploy stage is completed, and now let's go ahead and for the demonstration, let's go ahead and set up the approval so that it won't deploy directly. So I'm going to use myself as an approver, and let's test the manual workflow run so that we know how it works. Simply I can run the workflow. That will trigger the build, as you can see, and this time it should wait for me to provide an approval before it gets to the actual deployment. I'll show you again here on the workflow section. Here is the environment name basically, which we are using. So development is the environment name basically. Build is completed, and now you can see that it's not running the deployment this time. It's waiting for me to provide an approval. So I can simply click here on the review button. I might have received the email that some deployment is waiting for my approval on my GitHub account, email account. So I can simply review the changes. Either I can approve or reject and then provide the comment. So this time I'm going to say it's approved. So it will provide the changes as is. Let's modify our HTML page or the application HTML content and then try to publish the change. So I have simply modified the index.html page and put some custom message here, and we would like to see the demonstration of this. Before that, let's add another stage. So we will call it as a deploy onto dev. Okay, and deploy onto dev is basically waiting for, and we will add another stage and we'll call this stage as in deploy onto the test. Okay, and this test stage is waiting for build this and deploy into dev. So what does it mean? That deployment to test environment is going to be only possible if deployment to build and deployment to build stage and deployment to dev stage is completed. Then only it will deploy to the test environment. Okay, I can set up another environment where, let's say, test environment, where I might have different set of approver. Okay, so that could be the case. So simply I can commit the changes. As soon as my changes are pushed here, we should have a new actions triggered here. This is the modify trigger. And now if I go to the settings tab, environment, we should have another environment, hopefully, once the build step is going to be completed. If you look at now, we have 3 stages. One is build, and then we would have to deploy to the dev environment, and once the dev is going to be completed, it will deploy to the test environment. Okay, this will wait for the reviewer to review. I'll review it and I'll deploy to the dev environment like we did previously. You can see the history of the reviewer who has reviewed on what comment he has provided and everything, which you can simply view it here on this page. So our deployment is completed. I can simply browse the URL, same URL again. Last time the deployment was this, but now we have changed the index page content. So we should have a different content. So there you go. Our changes are successfully deployed here, and we have changes which we have published. This concludes our demonstration of the ASP.NET Core application with GitHub. All the contents which we have demonstrated in this video is available here on the GitHub repository. Link will be provided in the description. If you want, you can go ahead and download the source code. Apart from this, I do have the repository called the GitHub Actions, where I have multiple projects configured with their GitHub configuration. So everything whatever I'm demonstrating on the different videos, all the source code you can find clubbed together. You can simply fork this particular repository and found everything what we have demonstrated here. I hope you have found this particular demonstration useful. If it is, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching it. See you in the next video.